All right, let's get this show on the road. So I figured I'm gonna do a part 2 video on eyepiece focus. I apologize, I am sort of repeating myself in many ways. I've touched a lot of things that I'm gonna talk about now. I've touched on in other videos. I never intended these things to be a lecture series. I was just answering questions, right? So I titled it as DLO, Dark Lord of Optics Explanations, and made a playlist on YouTube, right? So whatever videos I put up that are not reviews, that are kind of these semi-technical explanations, I add them to that DLO explanations playlist. So if you subscribe to that, you'll get notifications. So there is some overlap. I apologize. At some point, as I go through all the questions, I'm gonna go back and look at it and maybe do some editing or do some sort of a summary thing that covers everything in sequence, but not just yet. Anyhow, so I did a video yesterday on eyepiece focus. I'm not sure when this one is gonna be put up, but probably within the next day or two. Where I talked mostly about how to focus the eyepiece on front focal plane scopes, because it is a little bit different from second focal plane scopes, with the primary difference being that you don't necessarily want to be doing this on the highest magnification. With second focal plane scopes you do. With front focal plane, well, not so much. Okay. Another important quirk, and this is not so much specific to front focal plane, but kind of related, is that eyepiece needs to be focused a little bit differently for low power variables, the ones that go down to 1x, to 1 power, and precision scopes, or anything really that goes a little bit higher up. And on top of it, there is also a little bit of I got a question on the previous video on what to do with parallax and things like that. So first I'm going to address that, and then I'll go and go in a little more detail using these masterful drawings over here. Parallax. The conventional wisdom is that you set the parallax at infinity, and as you adjust the eyepiece of your rifle scope, you look away at something, then you look the rifle scope, the reticle needs to be immediately sharp. Don't give your eye the time to accommodate. If it's not perfectly sharp, you look away, make small adjustment, right, and etc. So why do you look away? You look away so that your eye is not used to staring through the scope. But there's more to it than that. It's not that your eye needs to be not used to staring through the scope. Your eye also needs to be adapted to looking at something very far away, looking effectively at infinity. Your eye focuses, right? You can focus on something up close, depending how old you are. I'm getting older, so not that close anymore. Or it can focus on something fairly far. And there is a hyperfocal distance for your eye. It's usually about 100, 150 yards or thereabouts, but it varies for different people. Hyperfocal distance is basically just a distance where you focus on that, and everything beyond that is in focus. But you can easily test that theory, right? Look at some building that's, I don't know, 50 yards away from you, which sounds like it's fairly far, right? You look at that, focus on that, and you will notice that things beyond it are not in focus, right? So your eye it's still not infinity focus. When you focus a rifle scope for precision shooting, for long range shooting, and you should be focusing it for long range shooting because anything closer in gives you less focus issues, right? The eyepiece focus needs to be set up in such a way as you look at, let's say, your 1,000-yard target, whatever that you can see, let's assume it's a large target. You look at your 1,000-yard target with the naked eye, or you look at it through the scope, and your eye should not have to accommodate, right? So when you do this inside a room, you're not quite doing that. It's viable, but you should finish your focus outdoors, because what happens when you're focusing the eyepiece indoors, right? And if you don't, let's say you don't have a window next to you, right? You look through the scope, then you look at some wall that's, I don't know, if it's a good sized room, 5-6 yards from you, then you look through a scope again. But your eye is now adapted to look at something 5-6 yards away. And if you focus your eyepiece for that, it's not going to be quite the same as what you will have when you're shooting far away outdoors. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So if you have a window, you can do this indoors, right? You just stare out through the window. The best is look at the blue sky, or gray and rainy sky in Albuquerque, which is kind of weird. And let your eye adjust to that, right? And there should be no accommodation. Some people's eyes accommodate really, really quickly, and that is a little bit of an issue. And I've heard a number of people complain to me that this whole eyepiece focus doesn't work for them, because anywhere in the adjustment range, it's all in focus, and they eye adjusts so quickly that they can't really figure out if it's in focus or not. Okay, this is not going to sound good. So basically, most people, I think, who tell me that are just lazy and are not paying attention. Partly because I had a chance to run into several people who have that issue, and they were just lazy and they were not paying attention. They were not being thorough enough, and this is a painstaking and annoying process, and they just didn't want to do it. But once you're close to optimal focus, there I totally see it, right? So your eye, because you're just slightly out of focus and your eye accommodation is fairly fast, and you really don't know where your perfect focus is. And if you are one of the people who can't find the perfect focus with conventional means, there are certain tricks you need to do. So first you use the conventional method to get as close as possible, and you'll kind of get in the ballpark, but that's not going to be optimal. And then, assuming your scope is properly built, you go to a shooting range, find a target adequately far away, 100 yards, somewhere there. You look through the scope, your eye is going to accommodate to the reticle. The reticle is not perfectly focused, right? Then you use your parallax adjustment to make the target perfectly sharp, okay? You make the target perfectly sharp, right? And you look at it. And now what's going to happen when you're looking at the target is going to look perfectly sharp to you, and the reticle is not going to be perfectly sharp. So that gives you an opportunity to try to adjust the eyepiece just a little bit more, right? So that they're both perfectly sharp at the same time. It's an iterative process. You may have to go do this a couple of times, right? You will adjust the parallax, let's say a 100-yard target, make it perfectly sharp, then mess a little bit with the eyepiece to make the eyepiece and the target perfectly sharp. And even if your eye adjusts quickly, you will notice if your eye keeps on jumping between reticle focus and image focus, meaning they're not focused at the same time. Then you need to give your eyes some rest and repeat it. Right, you will find that you do it 2-3 times, and you'll end up making a small adjustment every time, but it will help you. It will help you achieve good focus. That obviously assumes your scope is built to spec. There are potential issues with the scope where for perfect parallax, the image may not be perfectly sharp. Right, that's usually. I mean, some scope manufacturers will tell you, "Oh, this just happened." Yeah, not if they do their job right. But anyhow, so that's that. If you've got questions, please ask. I can elaborate on this further. And now let's touch on low power variables versus high magnification, precision scopes. Before I talk about the reticle focus, I want to revisit what magnification means. A rifle scope is what's called an afocal telescope, right? That basically means that your rifle scope is looking at some particular field of view. Let's call it the field of view alpha, right? And if it's a true 1x, the image coming out of your eye will subtend exactly the same field of view, right? It's also going to be alpha. Same angle here and here means that it is 1 power. Okay, this angle may be different. Some rifle scopes have wider field of view, and some have a narrower field of view. But if the angle the eyepiece presents to your eye is the same as the angle that the objective sees out at whatever you're looking at, if these two angles are the same, it's a 1 power scope, right? I see this a ton of times. People set scopes side by side, compare, say, oh, this one has so much more magnification. No, it's just narrow field of view. Okay, it's not necessarily more magnified. There are tricks your eyes will play on you with different scopes. Okay, in a high magnification scope, right? Let's say it has the same eyepiece. Like a good example, I've got two March scopes here. This is a 3 to 24 by 52, and this is a 1 to 8 by 24 shorty, right? You notice that from the turret backwards, they're basically identical, and the eyepiece is effectively identical, right? So this eyepiece and this eyepiece will present the same exact field of view to the eye. This is the apparent field of view. This is what it will look like to you, right? And on most conventional scopes, this apparent field of view is between 16 and 25 degrees. I think some of the new wide-angle eyepieces are about 26, or thereabouts, 25. Traditionally, a little bit less. These March eyepieces, I don't know, I need to calculate. I think they're around 20 degrees or thereabouts. Some variable scopes where the eye relief changes with magnification, the apparent field of view also changes with magnification, something I dislike. I find it a little bit unnerving, but the image looks different to your eye and the field of view changes. So that's, to me, it's a little bit too much, but that's something to cover on another day. But to give you an example, if the objective sees some angle, let's call it beta, and your eye sees an angle called alpha, the ratio between them is your magnification, right? If it's a 20 power scope, like this March, I can set it on 20 power. 20 power means that the angle that I see out of the eyepiece is exactly 20 times larger than the angle, the field of view that the objective sees. Okay. All right. So with that covered, why does it make a difference for the eyepiece? Well, here's why. When you are dealing with a low power variable, right? Low power variable. This one goes from 1 power to 8 power. It's a true 1 power on the low end. Doing true 1 power is not so simple. More than a little, not so simple. But on 1 power, scope can really be fast. So if you're buying a scope that goes all the way down to 1 power, that means you need to use it on 1 power, right? If you are buying a scope and you think 90% of the time you're going to be on something other than 1 power, don't buy a low power variable. Well, some exceptions, but generally, because they're optimized to be really good on 1 power, and everything else is sort of an afterthought. Some are better than others. Like this March is quite good, the Minox ZP8 is good, there are many that are quite decent. But by and large, these scopes, low power variables, need to be set up to be good and to be optimized on 1 power. And whatever else happens in other powers, you just deal with it. Don't muck with the adjustments to deal with it. What that means is that on a 1 power scope, you should not really be optimizing the reticle all that much. In practical terms, you are, but what you should really be paying attention to is the distortion and the unity magnification, right? 1x magnification. Most low power variables on 1 power have a reasonable amount of distortion, and the eyepiece setting usually, with most scopes, some are beyond help, but with most scopes, the eyepiece setting is how you control that distortion. So you optimize your eyepiece for low power variable scope on the lowest magnification on 1 power, and you try to get it to be as close to unity magnification and as distortion free as possible. If that happens to give you trouble on higher magnification, well, send it back to the manufacturer, make them deal with it. All right? Or if that happens to be your eye, you're stuck. Right? Most of these will function just fine on high magnification if you optimize them properly on 1 power. When you optimize the eyepiece to minimize distortion, you're also focusing the reticle. Those generally happen to be in a more or less the same eyepiece setting, but often it's a little bit off. and you kind of just have to deal with it. Because you bought the scope to be able to go fast on 1 power. That's why you bought a low power variable. I hope that's why you bought it. Okay. I am having a discussion with somebody on Sniper side right now, actually, and the guy bought a fix. It's a very lightweight bolt gun. I have one of those, by far my favorite bolt gun of all I've seen as a general purpose bolt gun. And he wants to put a low power variable on it, and I'm trying to talk him out of it. Because on a bolt gun, you don't really need 1 power. You're just going to hunt with it within a couple of 100 yards. You don't really need 1 power per se, but you're sacrificing a fair bit of high magnification unless you get very lucky. Right? And you still have smallish objectives and all sorts of other things. I did another video why low power variables have small objectives. Okay. So in other words, I know I'm repeating myself. If 1 power, if performance on 1 power is not that critical, if the scope is not going to live mostly on 1 power, don't buy a low power variable. You are wasting money, effort, weight, size, space. You know, pick an hour, right? Okay. With high magnification scopes, low power, lowest magnification is important for field of view and a variety of other things, but you are not going to be doing precision. You know, what's it? This March is from 3 to 24 power, right? March scopes have a reputation for being a little bit finicky, for getting behind and all that. It's actually not that bad. The 3 to 24 by 42 is a little bit worse. This one is a 52mm objective. It's pretty decent. But the way I use the scope, and one of the reasons I'm revisiting it, the bloody thing is light. And I don't shoot on 24 power very much, right? So I would be only using high magnification when I'm inspecting what the conditions bring, the wind, mirage, whatever else, and if the shooting position is good. Most of my shooting happens between 10 and 15 power. Right? So the way I just went through the exercise of getting the eyepiece focused on this guy. I got it not long ago. It's a different reticle, not what I've seen before, so I figured I'm going to revisit the scope. The way I use this scope, the way I focus the reticle, I did it mostly the way I described in the part 1 in the previous video. I did most of the focusing on low power. I got it well optimized. I took my time. I haven't gone to the range with it yet, but the way my eyes work, I can get it. I can optimize it pretty nicely. Just putting it on something and looking through it. And then I go on to the magnifications that I use the most, and I check and make sure it is trouble-free there. Because on front focal plane scopes, there can be a difference across the magnification range, right? And I will optimize the eyepiece for the most stringent conditions, which in front focal plane scopes happen to be lower magnifications, right? This particular scope goes from 3 to 24, and the way the reticle is, I can see it adequately well on 3, but some of the small hash marks blend in. So what I ended up doing, this one I really focused the reticle on 6 power, where all of those little central fine lines are small but already visible, and that's where I achieved the best focus. And then I went to 10 power, and I went to 15 power, and I spent a fair amount of time going back between 10 and 15. That's where I use this kind of a scope the most, right? And made sure the reticle is okay. And this particular scope, nothing shifts. It's March never had issues really with build quality. These are nice scopes, and the properly optimized on 6 power reticle is staying very nicely focused across the entire magnification range. So this is gonna this is one of the better crossover scopes out there, and my intention for this is to go probably with my hunting rifle, partly because it's a 280 Remington, and I like shooting far with this rifle. 280 is an unusually, it's very underrated long-range cartridge. My rifle is very accurate, and I like practicing with it. It's comfortable to shoot. So that's what this is for, and it's comparatively light. Okay. So what else? I think that's basically it. So if you are looking for a summary of takeaways Front focal plane scope should not be optimized at top magnification. When you're focusing the reticle, try to do it outdoors, so when you look away from the scope, you can look far away. Let your eye adjust to infinity. Okay. Don't make the mistake of trying to focus a low power variable the same way you do a high magnification scope. With an LPVO, you're adjusting for 1 power and distortion-free image. That helps speed. And I think that's largely it. If there is something specific I skipped over, please let me know. Post a comment, ask me a question. I'll be happy to do part 3. If there is something specific I've missed, that is not coming to me right now. As always, thank you for your time. I really appreciate the fact that you were willing to spend this probably 15-16 minutes listening to me ramble about rifle scopes. I find this stuff interesting. Most other people don't. I'm always amazed that people actually watch this stuff. I do appreciate it. Visit my website. If you have questions, you know how to find me. Thank you.